Hey everyone. So my name is Ansgar, this is Caspar. We work at the Ethereum Foundation, have been thinking quite a bit about the Ethereum staking economics situation over the last year, and wanted to today talk a little bit about the part of that research that basically touches the broader topic of restaking and how we think about that. So I'll start with giving a bit of a general context setting, like what is the current staking situation on Ethereum. So basically, this is the total number of active validators on Ethereum since the launch of the beacon chain. And as you can see, there's of course some nuance. There's different times of more and less rapid growth of the staker set, but basically it's up only. You can see, continues throughout the merge, throughout the withdrawal activation. So more and more stakers on Ethereum. The question basically that naturally prompts is, well, when will that stop, that upwards trend basically? Where will we find an equilibrium, and what are the consequences of kind of that world that we will be in, and how it's going to be different from today? And so to answer the question, and one thing you can basically do is you can, in general, to find equilibria, you just look at demand and supply curves, where they intersect. And this is just a sketch. You can basically, in green, you can see the amount of yield that the protocol pays depending on how many stakers we have in the system, and then just sketched, basically like the trend of the supply curves, basically, how much we pay has been unchanged over time. Of course, people have been more and more willing to come in and stake, so this supply curve has been coming down. So why is that, and how far will that go? Basically, the core insight here is that the main game changer, the main difference over time has been the onset of LSTs. And in particular, you can think about with solo stakers, people that hold ETH, their willingness to stake is very heterogeneous. Basically, like some people, very technical, very willing to do solo staking duties. Other people would really only do that if offered like very high yield. So it's a very steep curve. Whereas with LSTs now, all of a sudden, it's basically as easy as pressing a button, and now you can be part of the staking set. So it becomes like a much more homogeneous supply curve. We call that the flattening effect. And what that leads to, you can already kind of sketch that, right? If you now put the demand curve back in, the intersection point goes from it's just examples, but right, it moves significantly from the left all the way to the right. So this flattening of the curve with LSTs leads to a much higher stake participation. And that's exactly what we've been seeing. And one more point on that, again, just to set the stage, is that even with relatively small differences in the ultimate supply curve, wherever that ends up with, as basically people are fully used to LSTs, and as LSTs are battle tested, even small differences in the supply curve can have massive impact on where exactly the equilibrium will be. Basically, conclusion here just being that really kind of the growth in the staking set can potentially continue for like a very long time, all the way up to 80, 90, 100% of each stake. That's all at least within the realm of the plausible. And now, usually at this point, we would continue on, and would talk about all the problems that we see with that trend. We have like an entire 5-point talk that we usually go through. But today, again, we're focusing on the parts that touch restaking directly. And in particular, we'll talk a little bit, and Caspar will do this now, about the first 2 points. Do you want to take over? Maybe.
Is my mic on? Yep. Right. So I'm going to talk a bit about the problems that come with this external yield. And just to kind of take a step back again, so staking yield is composed of both issuance yield, basically the rewards that the protocol pays you for correctly validating the chain as a validator, but then also external yield. So basically MEV yield and restaking yield. That is now kind of the new kid on the block, if you will. And then that's basically the rough composition of staking yield. And so here on this plot again that Ansgar talked about already, what we see is basically the issuance yield. And then in the dashed line, we see the external yield, so MEV yield plus restaking yield. So here, actually, the data is just based on MEV boost payments. So it's kind of like MEV yield, if you will. So the restaking yield, where what the yield levels will be, is kind of TBD, I guess. But basically, already here we see that the total staking yield is significantly higher than the issuance yield, meaning that the external yield already plays a significant role in the composition of the incentives to stake. And so the question then is like, what are some problems with it? Or I guess we're arguing that there are some problems with external yield being such a dominant kind of force in the staking incentive composition. And there's kind of two dimensions I want to touch on. The one being the kind of accessibility of this yield. So in MEV's case, it's quite good actually. So we have this kind of out-of-protocol auction called MEV Boost, which basically makes it straightforward for any validator to participate in this kind of MEV yield extraction. I will say, like, I mean, it took like a lot of kind of significant amount of work to make this work. So it's not like it's just by default possible. And there's a lot of work going into this, doing this basically in protocol with EPBS or attester-proposer separation ideas. But yeah, access is quite good. But on the other hand, we have a lot of yield variance. So the MEV rewards are very unevenly distributed, meaning that like they roughly follow a power law distribution, meaning that the average is, well, I guess here we can visualize this, the spikiness of MEV rewards. So basically what you see here is that we have this like uptick in the very last percentiles of the MEV payments that validators earn, meaning that effectively the average is much higher than the median, and just showing how spiky MEV is. And why is this bad? Well, this is bad because solo stakers don't have, basically, if you run a single validator, it's effectively a lottery. You might get, on average, you're not going to be very lucky, but you can also hit the jackpot, if you will. And if you're a staking pool, you can basically smooth out your rewards and just earn the average. Let's do a similar exercise for restaking. How does it look in terms of accessibility? Well, the thing is, it's heterogeneous. So some AVSs may require heavy machines for performing their duties, whereas some might actually be more looking explicitly for solo stakers, for example. The point being here is that the access is heterogeneous and it's kind of unclear what the net effect is. If I had to make a guess, I would assume that it will be leaning towards more heavy duties, meaning it's more of a centralizing force and not so good for solo stakers. But in terms of yield variance, it probably looks a bit better. Like, it's kind of unclear at this point, arguably, but in terms of spikiness, it's probably somewhere in between consensus duties, which are this kind of very stable income flow if you're online and performing your duties, and MEV on the opposite spectrum. And so it's going to be somewhere in the middle. But long story short, that is like, there's a bunch of centralizing effects that come from external yields that we might want to deal with. And to kind of illustrate another point of why this might be in particular bad, I'm going to take a quick detour and explain the difference between nominal and real yields, so that we can then kind of illustrate that final point that I wanted to make. So here we see again nominal issuance yield. So that's basically right now you earn about roughly 3% issuance yield if you stake. That's kind of the percentage by which your balance will go up. The thing that it doesn't consider is the inflation effect that takes place at the same time. Point being here, and this is what we're trying to illustrate here, if you notice the dashed line is the same as the gray line here, meaning here in this plot, the gray line is the total nominal staking yield, and the dashed green line now is the real total staking yield. And what this shows is basically how your yields, your staking yields, in real terms are reduced. Why are they reduced? They are reduced because as more and more people stake, more and more ETH is issued, which is basically dilution taking place. And so the earnings you make, you have to first kind of compensate for the inflation that's taking place before you are kind of getting into that real yield part. And to kind of illustrate this with an extreme scenario, when everyone is staking 100%, like if 100% of all ETH is staked, what that basically means is everyone is earning, so in nominal terms it's like roughly 2%, which if everyone's earning 2%, no one's actually really earning anything. It's just an accounting trick. And I guess this is the point I'm trying to illustrate here. It's like if everyone's earning 2%, it's just kind of a funny loop where you transfer basically yield from holders to stakers, but turns out they're the same thing. So yeah, nothing really gained. And so you kind of want to avoid that part of the stake participation levels. And now I want you to look at this graph and kind of notice how towards the end, towards the high participation levels, the share of the real staking yield is increasingly from external yields. Meaning that as you go towards 100%, your entire real yield comes from external yields. None of it is real in terms of issuance yield, because as you know, if everyone's earning 2% issuance yield, no one's earning 2% yield, but you still have that kind of MEV and restaking yield that is kind of real by its nature, because it's a flow from users in a way. The point here being that as the staking ratio increases, as you can see here on the bottom, the share of total real yield, the share of the external yield, the composition of the real yield is dominated more increasingly by external yields. And so the point of spikiness and unequal access is more pronounced in that setting. And so kind of the combination of these two things here is basically, it's getting worse with higher staking rates. And yeah, now I'm going to give it back to Ansgar.
Yeah, so basically, as Caspar just said, the fact that a significant portion already today of your incentive to stake comes from these external yield streams that are much less nice and consistent than the in-protocol ones, is a problem for reasoning about the incentives and specifically for keeping people like solo stakers, other small pools competitive. And so what can we do about this? Well, basically the idea is, well, let's first just focus on MEV, right? Because MEV is the well-known one, and then I'll in a sec talk also about how that affects restaking. But for MEV, the idea has been around for a while, and that's basically MEV burn. The idea is similar to how with 1559, we already do this with transaction fees today, right? We take transaction fees and instead of giving them to the builders, to the proposers, we instead just directly burn them. And the idea is, can't we just do the same thing with MEV? It turns out that that actually is a bit tricky to get right. In the past, maybe this is too technical, but basically the approach used to be that we try to keep the proposer role as part of the overall validator duties, but we try to basically constrain their behavior so that they always have to basically accept the highest bid that is available, and that way we can then extract that highest bid. But it's actually really hard to reason about, like, how can you avoid side channel agreements and all these kind of things. There were a few proposals over the last few years, but it always basically never moved to the actual stage of us implementing this because it's really tricky to get right. Over the last year or so, the thinking has evolved a little bit, and now instead of keeping the proposal role with the validator and trying to constrict their behavior, now instead we're basically just taking the proposing role away from the validators and auctioning it off. And so that is the idea behind a research area that's called attester-proposer separation, where we do exactly what I just said. We split those two duties off and then auction them off. And the nice thing is, and that's kind of, once you think about it, it becomes obvious. By auctioning off the right to propose a block in the future, you automatically capture the MEV, right? Because if there's a lot of MEV, the right to be the proposer is just more valuable, and then people will bid more. So you basically just, with such a mechanism, automatically get MEV capture. And so that's kind of, for the first time with this research direction now, MEV burn is actually practical, and there's a good chance that over the next few years, of course, Ethereum always moves slowly, that we'll actually have that in the protocol. Now, given that we have made so much progress on that front, the question is, can this also be applied to now restaking as this new type of external yield, or even further future, like new types of external yield that could arise? How to generalize this, basically. And to answer that question, we have to briefly look back at Caspar's picture of the different types of yield. So we have issuance yield, external yield, and at external we have the MEV that we just solved, basically, solved. And then we have restaking yield that we want to still solve. And specifically, we wanted to zoom in a little bit, right? Because restaking is this kind of abstract field. There's so many different types of AVSs. So this is maybe you can take away the glasses so we can see the full screen. So this is just one attempt at this classification. I guess maybe you can't see. This is probably in the most hidden part of the screen, so if you can't see it, my apologies. I'll read it out loud. But basically, it's just one classification approach. It's not necessarily like super sophisticated, but it kind of, I think, illustrates the point. So we're trying to separate out the types of AVSs, the types of duties that you can be paid for in a restaking context, and into the following ones. One would be proposer-specific actions. So this is things like pre-confirmations, like basically as a proposer you can have like roll-up specific duties or something. Basically anything where you leverage the fact that you actually, as someone who's restaking, that you're also a proposer on Ethereum. That is basically that category of duties of yield. Then we have attester-specific ones. Those actually the ones that we kind of really try to avoid having at all on Ethereum. So those would be the really problematic kind. These would be like reorg as a service, like attacks on Ethereum, briberies, networks, all these kind of things. Those would basically leverage the fact that the person that is rebonded in a restaking network is also an attester on Ethereum. And then the last two, DeFi yields, you can think about, well, it doesn't really matter that you actually are a validator on Ethereum. It just matters that you have ETH, right? And so you could also take the ETH and directly go to DeFi and put it up as collateral, or maybe in the future, I think restaking protocols are also considering for these types of AVSs offering taking in raw ETH directly as collateral. The idea is it doesn't matter that you're validated, it just matters that you locked up some funds. And then the last one, validator meme. Basically there the idea is maybe you just want Ethereum-aligned people to run your network as well. And here you basically just buy like a nice set of people to do your duties. That one, basically, you can just think of in a way as like an airdrop to early stakers, right? Obviously, as an AVS, you wouldn't want to just like on an ongoing basis have this be open to all new validators, because then you just attract mercenaries that just join the staking set just because they want to be part of your AVS. So that's specifically what you don't want. So what you would do is you'd basically have a cutoff slot. You'd say, hey, only people that have been validating before this moment in time, those we would accept. And then in a way, the ability to earn extra yield is just an extra airdrop for early stakers. If you look at basically this classification, and again, it's not necessarily fully conclusive, but it's trying to give you like an intuition of how to think about the different types of yield. You can see one very important direct distinction between the two sides. On the left, you have a yield that directly comes from your active ongoing role in the Ethereum network. On the right, those are independent types of yield. Yes, the validator meme, that is because you used to be part of Ethereum validation, but it's not something that influences your incentives going forward. It's more like a retroactive reward. And so for analysis of like the incentives to stake on Ethereum, we can just completely ignore those two, right? Those two are just like completely separate, more like ETH-based yields, but they're not staking yields in that sense. Which leaves the other two. So how do we solve the other two? Well, pretty easy. As I already said, the attester-specific one, we just really don't want. There's no legitimate use case for attester-specific yields. These are all really bad. So those we basically just have to make sure we are robust against. We have to do things like social slashing, like automatic detection and slashing. Those things really should not happen. And if they ever happen, we'll make sure that we are robust against them. The proposer-specific ones, they are legitimate, but there we just use the same mechanism that we have used before, and we just burn it. So that's basically idea. And so if you then think about this way, so this is another type of yield that we are burning. So maybe is there something more general that we can, like instead of like every time a new type of yield comes around, we have to manually think about how to do it? Well, the idea here basically is like we try to bring all external yields that are rising from specific validator roles into under protocol control. So we're thinking about it not from the types of, okay, there's MEV, there's restaking, there's transaction fees. Instead, we're thinking about what are the roles that as a validator you basically fulfill. And then under that, we always try to like treat all the yield that accrues to that in the same way. So for example, with proposing, everything that all the type of yield that accrues to the proposer in the system, we want to capture and burn. With transaction fees, we already do this today. MEV, we'll do in the future. And the amazing thing actually is that the proposer-specific restaking yield, that type of burn we get for free with MEV burn. If you think about it, if we have an auction for proposing rights, whether the extra yield you can earn is from MEV or from other restaking-related AVS type sources, doesn't really matter. All of that would basically accrue to the same total value of being a proposer, and that's what I meant. By treating the entire proposer section as one, we just abstract that away, and wherever the value comes from to be a proposer, we just burn it all. And then with things like attester, here we would basically make the distinction, and we would say, well, there we draw a line in the sand, and we would treat it differently, and would be able to handle it. And this way, basically, oh wait, yeah, maybe go back. And this way, basically, we have a more general framework for how to treat all types of external yield. And the last one, that's just a sneak peek. If you actually want to hear a bit more about our general thoughts around issuance and whatnot, we'll have another talk on Thursday at the main venue. That's going to be a bit longer, a bit more in detail. So come join us there. Quick sneak peek. One potential future that we've been exploring, for example, instead of just keep having more and more staking participation, one thing we could do is basically have an issuance curve that's a bit more opinionated on the right side, so that we are like always end up in some kind of middle range. And the question would be, what is the situation with external yield in this picture? Do we still need to care about bringing external yield under control? Is it maybe no longer an issue? But then basically here the idea that I wanted to briefly just like point out is just, no, even in such a world, like this is basically already a very different kind of staking future, but even there it would be just as important, if not even more, to have external yield under control. So this is something we should do in any case, because if you look at it, you can see that the gap between external yield and internal yield basically is even bigger. So even at today's levels, it would already be 50-50, right? Which is much worse than it is in today's real world. So basically, in such a world, external yield is even more of a problem. So basically, our ability to bring it under protocol control would be even more crucial. So basically, TLDR, we really need to do this, to go down this path and have a more generalized framework for dealing with the external yield, including the relevant types of restaking yield. Everything else, by the way, you can keep. You know, like we don't want all your other restaking yields. We're only after your proposer-specific one. Yeah, and with that, I think that was again just like a little like primer on how we think about this entire topic. So thanks, and I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but yeah.
Yeah. There's a question here.
Do we have a mic? No,
mic, maybe?
No, it's fine. Wait, mic is coming.
We'll repeat it.
I can just repeat the question. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, basically, the question was, with MEV and now the MEV boost architecture, we've seen that has basically fast-forwarded and pushed more into the direction of more centralized builder architecture. What would be the equivalent impact of restaking be on that? Caspar, do you maybe?
What? Yeah, no, I zoned out for a second. What were you saying?
No worries. Okay, I can also answer. No worries. So basically, I think it's less I think that is less a function of the external yield directly, and I think it is more a function actually of where do we have it? Of basically the generalized like PBS architecture on Ethereum. So there are all these different ideas around attester-proposer separation. I think thinking about the centralizing implications of those and to what extent this is a centralization that is fine because because we have mitigating mechanisms, or to what extent this is maybe something we're not fine with. That I think that is something that really should flow into this consideration the most. So basically, like, how do we do ePBS? How do we do APS? Look-ahead auctions, just-in-time auctions, all these kind of things, I think would be where it would look more than just the raw amounts of yield, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah. Uh-huh. I think you have a mic, maybe a working mic. Try again. Nope. Okay, wait. So you said specifically the proposer-specific part. Yeah, what was the question on that? Yeah, so basically, unfortunately, I only caught part of that, but basically the idea was just to expand a little bit on the proposer-specific and like what that would look like, right? Yes, exactly, so restaking yield. I mean, I will say, given that we are still in the early days in general, I don't think I have like a super concrete answer on this. Yeah, the only one very concrete answer, of course, is pre-confirmations. So pre-confirmations would right now be the hot topic first big example of this, but it's easy to imagine that there could be other similar types, but like basically pre-conf style types of services, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll be around. Come talk to us. But yeah.
Well, thank you.